that verily, indeed, in that is a sign, but most of them are not meant to be believers, etc. He repeats that in the stories that are coming forward in the Shu'ara. And this is a lot of the ways that Allah communicates His message to us is through stories, because we love stories. ذكر تبارك وتعالى أن أكثر الناس ليسوا بمؤمنين. Allah mentions here that most people are not believers. وسواء قوم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أو غيرهم. So whether he's talking about the people of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or others. So in other words, from that time until this time and after, most people are not believers. Ayatullahi bahira lawla qadratullahi wa mashi'ata an yu'mina ba'dhum wa yakfuru bi ba'd la amana jami'un nas lianna al-ayati dhahira. So he said that this ayah is clear. Was clear about that the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the signs of Allah Himself are very, very clear. In the heavens and the earth and everything, for example, everything that we just said about the Quran, these are all very, very clear signs. Right? They're very clear. They're shining. لولا قدرة الله ومشيئته. If it had not been for Allah's qudra, His ability and His will, أن يؤمن بعضهم ويكفر ببعض لآمن جميع الناس. If it were not for His ability, and if it were not for His will, everybody would believe. In other words, the fact that we see, because Allah's signs are so obvious and they're so clear, it's actually, because most people don't believe, that's actually a sign pointing to His ability and His will. Because otherwise, they would have no choice, because the signs are so clear. That's what he's saying. Which is it's the opposite of the propaganda that we hear. People would like to give you the impression that this Islam thing is so fragile, it's so frail, it's so hocus pocus, it's so that only a fool would believe it. But a person speaking that way is showing you the qudra of Allah. They're showing you the power and the ability of Allah and His will right in front of you. That I don't know how it's possible, but this person doesn't believe, even though it's an outright, indisputable presentation that's happening in front of us. That there should be anyone to be able to deny it is only that person themselves is a sign. Yeah. Because the ayats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether we're talking about the Quran, or whether we're talking about creation from nothing, whether we're talking about the development of the child in the womb, you're talking about cell structure, you're talking about physics, you're talking about quantum physics, that the further you go, the more you go into the atomic, subatomic world, the more chaos you find. That there is order coming out of chaos, which is impossible. Or, the one that I always mention, that it seems simple enough, but if everything is made of atoms, if the pen is made of atoms and the desk is made of atoms, why can I not just push the pen through the desk? And they'll say, oh, it's because of the molecular bonds. My thing is, okay, are the bonds, like, speaking of molecular bonds, are those bonds plastic? Are they hard? No. Then where does the quality of plastic and hardness come from? Much less the quality of the density. Are the bonds? Are the atomic bonds? Are they dense? They're not dense. Then where does the density come from? Yeah. So anyway, all of those are the inexplicable, which is at the very base of everything, is in itself the sign or the signs that our understanding, our mindsets, that we have to develop a new science every now and again to kind of, whether it's related to gravity or whether it's related to, relativity, or whether it's related to our place in the universe, or, how are the inner workings of our body work, etc., 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 etc. We're always having to reinvent. Sometimes some of the most basic principles have to be readdressed, or they're quietly dismissed. What used to be the absolute rock hard truth 200 years ago is not the case in many fields now. The ever changing, the ever slipping, seeming foundation of the world is in itself a great sign that we just can't really figure it out. Enough to where people would have to say, especially those who actually know anything, people who actually are experts in their fields, many of them in terms of science, they will admit there are many things they don't know and they don't understand, and it actually causes them to be quiet. And are those not signs? So he says, وَلَكِنَّهُ أَضَلَّ مَنْ شَاءَ مَعَ ذَلِكَ وَهُمْ أَكْثَرُ. But anyway, even though these signs are clear, he misguides whom he wills anyway, and they are more. So there are more of them than anyone. It's Allah's decision to make people more disbelievers than not. It's His decision. The fact that there are so many of them is not a sign of His non-existence, it's a sign of His existence. أكثر الناس غير مؤمنين. He said most people they're disbelievers. They're non-believers. غير مؤمنين. لأن أكثر الناس لا يعقلون. Interesting, but he explains why. So yes, it's the will of Allah. But how does the will of Allah manifest here? He says because they don't think. لا يعقلون. They don't have intellects. They don't have an intellect. لا يعقلون. They don't think. They don't use their head. So is there a relationship between faith and knowledge? Let's see. أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. He said they don't know. Most people don't know. They don't know. So they don't think and they don't know. He says تقرر في القرآن هذا. This is repeated in the Quran. ليس عندهم علم. They don't have knowledge. ليس عندهم عقل. They don't have an intellect. Right? So how many times, Allah, for example, compares most human beings to cows. They're just chewing in the field. بل هم أضل. They're even more astray. فلهذا ليس عندهم إيمان. And he said, and that's the reason why, or due to this reason, they don't have faith. So there is according to Shaykh Ibrahim, there is a connection, there is a relationship between faith and knowledge and belief. And a lot of times, when you listen to people who reject faith openly, like outright reject faith, oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes, they're also they can't really explain their argument. They just reject it. Or they can't hold a conversation about it. They just reject it. But you oftentimes find that's because they don't really have the capacity for many things. That's not always true, by the way. But the thing is, well, what is knowledge then? Because you do have some people, I don't want to mention them, but you have some, well, it's okay, I guess, they're kind of world famous for it, like, I think Christopher Hitchens, comes to mind. He was ostensibly a very intelligent man, but if the knowledge that you have can't inform you about your nature, about the nature of the human being, then it isn't really knowledge, it's just words. So what kind of knowledge is he talking about? He who knows himself knows his Lord. And faith is about putting one's trust in what one understands about the nature of human beings. Not just our nature, but our nature with the reality of things. That we are in a state of need. We are in a state of dependency. And that is the name of the game. And so to the extent that you realize your state of need, the degree to which you realize your dependency is the degree to which you realize your humanity. Which is the degree to which you realize how much faith in God you must have because of how little ability, actually you have no ability whatsoever. So if a person actually knows and thinks about their state of need, then they will come to some very firm beliefs about the nature of the world. And obviously that's a different subject for a different time. So he said, فَلِهَذَا لَيْسَ عِنْدَهُمْ إِيمَانٌ. So for that reason they don't have faith. فَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ. And your Lord is the exalted in might, the merciful.